So part 3 is getting towards the business end, and it's been a source of a lot of debate and deliberation about what was wrong, what's needed, how it goes back together. The workshop instruction book and parts book is helpful to some extent, and then there's obviously help from other owners, other experts and online forums, but really struggled to kind of get on top of. I'm pretty comfortable with how it goes back together. That's pretty obvious. It's a 4-speed box, so there's effectively 4 gears like this, from first gear at the front and 4th gear or top at the back, and I'll talk through that in a second. There's 2 shafts or axles, so this one here is the lay shaft, which might indicate why the box is an LS. Lay shaft, LS, might be wrong. And then this is the main shaft here. So these gears go on the main shaft, and these on the lay shaft, which is the bottom shaft as you look at the box. But the bit that's been, so the gearbox had firstly a lot of play. The clutch basket was moving around a lot, and once it finally got the main or the sleeve gear off, this is the sleeve gear, by removing the union nut at the end, the sprocket comes off. So I'll just grab the bearing real quick. So this is a R&M bearing. It's actually a bit of a unique one. So it's actually marked. It's an LJ30, which has a 62mm outside bearing race, outside diameter, and it should have a 30mm inside diameter, but this one is actually marked 1 and 3/16, which is just over that. So so you can see the sleeve gear does slip on there, but usually you'd expect a lot more resistance, if not a press fit. So the technique here, and what I'll do is stick this in the freezer, stick the sleeve gear in the freezer to shrink it a little bit, so that the sleeve gear isn't spinning inside the inner race of the bearing. It's actually the bearing that's spinning, like so. So anyway, this bearing had a lot of play in it, so decided to get a new bearing which is fitted into the gearbox casing, which I'll discuss in the next part. So put that bearing to one side, but that's an R&M LJ30, and I'll talk about what the new bearing equivalent of that is. But the bit that's been causing kind of a few sleepless nights is the thrust washer. So what happens is the and well, before we get onto that, firstly, the sleeve gear had no bushing, so you can see there's a brand new bronze, and it needs to be bronze, it needs to be hard, brand new bronze washer in there. There was nothing in there, so the sleeve gear was rocking around on the axle, a lot of wear on the axle, so that's actually been milled. So the main shaft has been milled to get it as sort of as parallel as possible, and with the bushing, which is very thin, but not insignificant, you know, so it does play a role. So that then slips nicely onto the main shaft with very little movement, and obviously with a bit of lubricating oil in there, once installed properly, that'll be going super nice. And the clutch basket was moving around here, which would have probably worn out the bearing, the main bearing. So don't know why there wasn't a bushing in there. There was no fragments in the gearbox when we took it to bits. Maybe there was never a bushing in there, but there's one in there now, and very pleased with that. So this is the thrust washer. I'm going to show you the thrust washer that was on the gearbox originally. So the thrust washer sits on the main axle, and when the clutch lever is pulled and the springs are engaged, it takes the weight of that. So the force of the gearbox is then going through that thrust washer and allows that sleeve gear to spin on the main shaft. And over time, just through wear and tear, that thrust washer then decreases in thickness, and that then creates lateral play in the main shaft, which then requires a little bit of shimming, which isn't unnormal. There was some shims in this gearbox, but a lot of shims. But normally you would shim, and we will do this, we'll shim the axle so that there's 0.1 of a mil play, just enough play so that the gears don't bind. But if you look at that, you can see that there's some scoring on the side of the thrust washer that has the oil grooves. And that scoring has been caused because the thrust washer is just being located freely on the shaft and has been spinning like this. So those splines or teeth have been wearing the thrust washer over time. Now, this is where it got a bit complicated in that there's been several variants of this main shaft and the arrangement with the thrust washer, and it's taken a lot of time just to decipher that. So very early types, I believe, came with a small peg here on the smooth part of the shaft, and the teeth on the inside of the thrust washer just simply locate on that peg, not sort of fixed, it's not press fit or anything like that, but it just stops the thrust washer rotating around like this and causing those grooves. It just holds it so the thrust washer spins in time with the main shaft like this. So that's variant one. Then as these boxes have evolved, I found, and you may have this, I found that some of these splines are machined. So from this overall length, there's been machining of the splines down a little bit to allow the thrust washer to still be located in this position, but the splines are longer to the thickness of this thrust washer, and then the teeth, so the thrust washer actually slots onto some splines, but not these ones, because these are obviously a larger diameter. So that's been a source of real confusion and head scratching as to what was going on and what was causing that wear. But having got the shaft back from the engineers today, just this morning, I'll try and show this to the camera, but you can see, I'm just trying to get the light in the focus here, but just where my finger is, I can see a round circle where there would have been a peg. So there was obviously a metal peg there, maybe tacked on. It wouldn't have been machined, but somehow it was attached and it's come off, which has been allowing the thrust washer to spin. So that then identifies that this is an earlier type main shaft. Again, that the oil grooves kind of indicates that, but it just sort of then confirms exactly which position the thrust washer needs to be in, which is here, resting against these splines but secured with a peg. Then the sleeve gear is then in this position. So in a later part of this video, once we get to laying it all up and working out the shimming, that's the position the main axle will be in relation to the box and the sleeve gear, which obviously is then fixed in the bearing. So the shaft can't go this way because the bearing holds this in place. So any play will be this way, and that's where the shims and the left-hand bearing is. So I got a new thrust washer from Racing Norton, and just looking at it, it's of the same design. It has the oil grooves and oil holes, but it's thicker, and it's thicker because it's just not worn. This one here is worn, and that's why there was shimming needed. But in addition, you've got the wear in here, so you're talking about probably one to three, maybe more, 3 mil of shimming, which is a lot of shims, and that's been the source of the play, which has been just general thinning of the overall thickness, which is normal. So this is kind of like a service part, probably once every several years, maybe, depending on use. But the scoring has been caused by the lack of that peg. So what I'm planning to do is, and this might not be the perfect fix for purists or whatever, but I've actually got some liquid metal. It's just an anodite product, which I've been using to repair the front of the gearbox, which I'll show you in a later part. But it's very solid when it dries. It's a 2-part epoxy, So what I'm going to do is and I won't film this because it'll take some curing time, but I'm actually going to create a peg. So I'm going to put a drop of araldite here once it starts to cure, so it's not so runny, and I'm going to create enough of a peg so that one of these teeth locate onto it, and all it needs to do is just secure it here so it doesn't spin. So with a bit of maybe some sharp chisels or whatever, once it's dried, I'll be able to sort of very gently thin that down to the point where it's of the right shape, just to hold that thrust washer in place, and then we should be on to laying up the shafts into the box and determining the shimming, and then we're on to the final, hopefully the home straight, which is actually rebuilding the box. But what I'll do just as part of this video is I'll just reassemble. So I'll put the sliding pinion onto the shaft here. There is a bushing here, so that's normal. There's supposed to be a bushing there. And then don't forget the thrust washer, and then the main gear or the sleeve gear there. So this one spins freely, that's why it's got that bushing there. So this is how the gears line up in the box, and hopefully you can see this, is that with the thrust washer in that position, it just proves that that's where it's supposed to be, because the meshing of the sleeve gear is exactly where it needs to be on the lay shaft 4th gear. If it was too far up the splines, it would obviously be sitting too far up there. I'm just going to just try and move this to a better angle just to demonstrate this. So with everything compressed, including the sleeve gear onto the thrust washer, you can see that all the gears are nicely in line. So 1st gear, 2nd gear, 3rd gear and top, and then the sliding pinions move like this whenever the gear is changed. So that then just proves that that's where it's supposed to be, and not up on the splines, which some workshop instructions indicated that's because the splines would have been longer with the machining for the teeth to locate the thrust washer on. So that's where everything's supposed to be. I'll run through the part numbers for these in the next part, but just whilst we're on this video is just to confirm, you know, some of the gear sizes. So starting off with the lay shaft, this one has a 32 tooth 1st gear, then 29 teeth, then 23, then 20, and then on the main shaft from 1st to 4th is 14, 17, 23 and 26. And when you refer to the 4-speed manual, you look at the gear ratio table. This is a standard gear ratio box. It's not a close or a wide, it's a standard. So that then confirms just everything about the box internals, but we'll have the manual on the next part of the video just to sort of illustrate that to the camera. So I'm going to get on with mixing up some araldite, try this as a solution. I'm happy to pull the box to bits next year if obviously there's another solution that's a bit more longer term rather than araldite 2-part epoxy. But for the time being, I think that'll work. It should hold it in place. It doesn't need to have any load. It's good with temperature. It's good with oils and solvents. So I'm going to use that just because I have it. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next part.